Take your hands off my mother's medicine!"
The Duke of Ravenscroft struck the silver cup from his wife's grasp. It hit the stone floor with a sharp crack, splashing dark liquid across the hem of her ivory gown. Duchess Rosamund Vale froze beside the bed. One of her hands remained beneath the Dowager Duchess's neck. The other was still reaching for the vial that had rolled beneath the nightstand. "Gideon," she whispered, staring at her husband, "your mother is still breathing. Send for hot water and my medical chest. No one is bringing you another poison." The words silenced the room. 3 maids stood against the wall with their hands pressed to their mouths. Dr. Halbrook remained near the fireplace, pale and motionless. At the foot of the bed, Lady Verena Ashcombe, Gideon's widowed cousin, clutched a lace handkerchief to her lips, as though suppressing a sob. Only moments earlier, Rosamund had found the Dowager Duchess Augusta convulsing after drinking her nightly tonic. Her pulse had been erratic, her skin cold, her pupils unnaturally wide. Those were not the effects of the sleeping remedy Rosamund had prepared. They were signs of poison. "Listen to me," Rosamund said. "The tonic in that cup was altered. If we act now, I may still be able to—" Augusta's body jerked once beneath her hands. Then it went still. The long case clock in the corridor marked 11 with a single hollow chime. Dr. Halbrook crossed the room at last. He placed 2 fingers against the old woman's throat, waited, and withdrew them. "The Dowager Duchess is dead." A maid began to weep. From the brass cage near the window, Augusta's green parrot ruffled its feathers and gave a low, rasping cry. Rosamund looked down at the woman who had once dismissed her as a country physician's daughter, then slowly learned to trust her judgment. Only that morning, Augusta had summoned Rosamund privately and asked for help examining several suspicious withdrawals from the family trust. "If anything happens to me," the Dowager had warned, "protect Edmund. Do not let Verena control his inheritance." Edmund was Augusta's 8-year-old grandson, orphaned after the death of Gideon's younger brother. Under the trust, Rosamund served as the boy's guardian alongside Augusta. Now Augusta was dead, and Verena stood 3 steps from the bed. She killed her. Verena spoke so softly that everyone heard her. Rosamund raised her head. The widow's face appeared stricken, but her eyes were dry. She pointed toward the vial beneath the nightstand. "That bottle bears Rosamund's initials. I saw her bring it into this room." "You saw me bring Augusta's usual sleeping draught," Rosamund replied. "That is not the same liquid she drank tonight." Verena bent and retrieved the vial before Rosamund could stop her. A small parchment label displayed the letters RV in dark ink. Gideon took it from her. His face hardened. For 6 years, Rosamund had prepared medicines for the Ravenscroft household. She had treated injured tenants without payment, delivered children during storms, and contained a fever that might have swept through the estate. Every remedy she produced carried her initials. But the writing on this label was too heavy. The R curved inward instead of outward, and the ink was newer than the paper beneath it. "It is forged," Rosamund said. Gideon looked at her with an expression colder than anger. "My mother opposed our marriage from the beginning. And yet I spent 3 years caring for her. She intended to remove you as Edmund's guardian." Rosamund's breath caught. That was a lie. She turned toward Verena, who lowered her gaze with carefully measured sorrow. "Who told you that?" "My mother did," Gideon replied. "This afternoon. She said she had discovered irregularities in the boy's trust." Rosamund understood then. Augusta had found irregularities, but someone had persuaded Gideon that they led to his wife. "Your mother asked me to investigate those accounts. Conveniently, she can no longer confirm it." The accusation hurt more because Gideon did not shout. He had already decided what he believed. Rosamund looked beneath the vial's parchment label and saw a faint line of deep red wax around the neck. Embedded in it was a tiny crescent-shaped impression. Her own seal bore a sprig of rosemary. "Gideon, look at the wax." He did not. "Send for the constables," he told his steward. A murmur passed through the servants. Rosamund rose slowly, her knees unsteady. "You would have me arrested before examining the cup, before questioning the servants, before discovering who entered this room? I will not allow you to turn my mother's death into another display of your cleverness." Verena stepped nearer to him and touched his sleeve. "Gideon, perhaps Rosamund should be confined somewhere private, for the family's dignity." Rosamund watched his eyes move toward Verena's hand, but he did not remove it. That small permission told her how completely the balance inside Ravenscroft had shifted. "What of Edmund?" Rosamund asked. Verena answered before Gideon could. "He will remain with me." "No." The force in Rosamund's voice startled everyone. She moved toward the door, but 2 footmen blocked her path. "Edmund is frightened of Verena," she said. "Augusta knew it. That is why she made me his guardian." "You are accused of murdering his grandmother," Gideon said. "You will not go near the boy." The door opened, and the steward returned with 2 estate constables. One held iron restraints. Rosamund stared at her husband. 6 years of marriage stood between them. 6 years in which she had repaired his tenant's trust, saved his sister during childbirth, and sat beside him through the fever that nearly killed him. Once, Gideon had told her that her hands made Ravenscroft safer. Now he nodded toward those same hands. "Take her." One constable seized her wrist. Gideon stepped forward and pulled the wedding ring from her finger. The gold resisted at the knuckle before slipping free. He placed it on the table beside the poisoned cup. The gesture was deliberate, public. Verena's mouth softened with something dangerously close to satisfaction. As Rosamund was led toward the door, the parrot began thrashing inside its cage. Its wings struck the brass bars so violently that feathers scattered across the carpet. "Quiet, Hector," Verena snapped. The bird stopped, its black eyes fixed upon her. Everyone expected it to call Rosamund's name. Augusta had often trained the creature to repeat the names of visitors and servants. Instead, Hector tilted its head and spoke in the dowager's unmistakable cadence. Verena changed the bottle. The room went still. The parrot screamed louder. Verena changed it. Verena changed the bottle. Gideon turned slowly toward his cousin. For the first time that night, Lady Verena Ashcombe looked afraid. Verena's face lost all color. Then she laughed. The sound was thin and breathless, but it broke the paralysis in the room. "It is a bird," she said, "a mindless creature repeating whatever it has heard." Hector tightened his claws around the brass perch. "Verena changed the bottle," he repeated. Gideon stared at his cousin. For a moment, Rosamund believed doubt had finally entered his mind. "Where did it learn those words?" he asked. "How should I know?" Verena pressed her handkerchief against her chest. "Perhaps Rosamund trained it. She has spent hours in this room while your mother was ill." "That would require me to know in advance that Augusta would be poisoned tonight," Rosamund said. "Is that what you are claiming?" Verena's hesitation lasted only a heartbeat. "I am claiming that you planned this." Rosamund turned to Gideon. "Examine the wax around the vial. It carries a crescent seal. Mine bears rosemary." Dr. Halbrook extended his hand. "Your Grace, I should inspect it." Gideon gave him the bottle, but Verena stepped between them. "Surely we should not allow anyone to tamper with evidence." "The physician is examining it, not destroying it," Rosamund said. Halbrook held the vial near the candlelight. His thumb moved over the red wax, and his expression changed. There is an impression, he admitted. A crescent, as her grace described. Verina's eyes flicked toward the bottle. Rosamund caught the movement. So you recognize it. I recognize nothing. Then empty your pockets. The room fell silent again. Verina's fingers curled around her skirts. You have no authority to search me. Neither did you have authority to take Edmund from me. Gideon stepped forward. Enough. Rosamund faced him. You ordered my arrest based upon a label anyone could forge. Now there is evidence pointing elsewhere, and you still silence me. The parrot's words are not evidence. The seal is. It may belong to any number of people. Then let us discover whom. For one painful instant, Rosamund saw the husband she remembered, the man who had once trusted her judgment over that of 3 London physicians. But Gideon looked toward his mother's body, and grief hardened into something more convenient than uncertainty, anger. The constables will take Rosamund to the East Tower, he said. No one is to enter until the magistrate arrives. Rosamund felt the decision like a door closing inside her. He had been given a reason to pause. He had chosen not to. Verina lowered her head, concealing her relief. As the constables led Rosamund into the corridor, Hector cried again. This time, beneath the repeated accusation, Rosamund heard another phrase. Red room, red room. She looked back, but a constable pulled the door shut. The East Tower chamber had once housed a governess. Its narrow windows were barred, its fireplace cold, and its walls smelled of damp plaster. The constables removed Rosamund's hairpins and medicine pouch before locking her inside. She waited until their footsteps faded, then examined her cuffs. The iron had scraped the skin around her right wrist, but the lock was old. Her father had taught her more than medicine. Traveling through poor villages, he had insisted she learn how to escape a jammed carriage, repair a broken latch, and protect herself when no help was near. Yet opening the door would only make her appear guilty. She needed evidence, not flight. Red room, she whispered. Ravenscroft had no chamber officially known by that name. But Augusta's private sitting room had once been decorated in crimson silk. It had remained closed since the dowager moved to the west wing. If Hector had heard Augusta confront Verina there, something might still be hidden inside. A soft scrape sounded beyond the door. Rosamund rose. Who is there? Please do not speak loudly. The voice belonged to Thomas Bell, Augusta's 15-year-old page. A key turned, and the door opened barely wide enough for his anxious face to appear. Lady Verina sent the constables downstairs, he whispered. She says Edmund has run away. Rosamund's stomach tightened. When? Just after they took you. His nurse found his bed empty. Has anyone searched the old chapel? Thomas shook his head. Edmund often hid there when frightened. Augusta had shown him a narrow priest's passage behind the altar, a secret known to few members of the household. Tell no one I suggested it, Rosamund said. Find Mr. Pritchard, the stable master. He is loyal to Edmund. Ask him to search the chapel alone. Thomas started to leave. Wait, did you hear Hector say anything before Augusta died? The boy glanced down the corridor. I heard the dowager arguing with Lady Verina yesterday. Her Grace said she had found payments to a man called Mercer. Lady Verina told her she would regret opening the old accounts. Who is Mercer? I do not know, but afterward the dowager gave me a letter for the magistrate. Rosamund stepped closer. Did you deliver it? No. Lady Verina stopped me at the gate and said the Duke had ordered all correspondence inspected. She took it. That explained Gideon's false belief about the trust. Verina controlled which version of Augusta's discovery reached him. Thomas, where is the letter now? I saw Lady Verina carry it into the red sitting room. Before Rosamund could answer, Footsteps approached from the stairwell. Thomas slipped through the doorway, but someone seized him from behind. The boy cried out. Verena appeared in the opening, one gloved hand gripping his shoulder. In the other, she held the missing letter above a candle flame. "You have always been too curious, Rosamund," she said. The paper caught fire. Rosamund lunged forward, but Verena slammed the door between them. Through the wood came Thomas's muffled protest, followed by Verena's chilling reply. "Take the boy to the cellar. He saw far more than the Duchess did." Rosamund threw herself against the door. "Thomas!" No answer came, only retreating footsteps and the faint drag of shoes across stone. She pressed her ear to the wood. 2 people were carrying him, judging by the uneven rhythm. Verena had at least one accomplice inside Ravenscroft. Rosamund stepped back and forced herself to breathe. Panic would not save Thomas or Edmund. She needed a way out that would not lead through the guarded corridor. Her gaze moved around the chamber. The east tower had been built over the remains of an older monastery. Behind its walls ran forgotten passages once used by servants to carry coal and linens unseen. During renovations 3 years earlier, Rosamund had treated a mason whose hand had been crushed when one such passage collapsed. He had mentioned an opening behind the governess's fireplace. Rosamund knelt on the cold hearth and ran her fingers along the stones. Most were fixed with hard mortar. One near the iron grate shifted beneath her palm. She pulled until her nails tore. The stone came free. Behind it rested a rusted metal lever. When Rosamund dragged it downward, part of the wooden paneling beside the fireplace released with a muffled click. A narrow black passage opened before her. She took the candle from the table and slipped inside. The panel closed behind her, leaving only enough room to move sideways between damp walls. Dust coated her dress, and cobwebs caught in her hair. Somewhere below, a man cursed. Rosamund extinguished the candle and followed the voice. Through a crack in the wall, she saw the cellar corridor. Thomas lay unconscious across the shoulders of a broad man wearing a groom's coat. His face was unfamiliar, but a crescent-shaped clasp fastened his cloak. The same symbol marked the poisoned vial. Verena walked beside him. "Mercer will collect the boy before dawn," she said. "Once the magistrate arrives, every witness must either support our account or disappear." "And the child?" the man asked. "Edmund knows nothing yet, but if Rosamund reaches him, she may teach him what to say." Rosamund gripped the stone edge until it cut her palm. Verena stopped outside a storage room. "Lock the page here, then search the chapel." The man dropped Thomas onto the floor and dragged him inside. When he emerged, Verena handed him a key. "If the Duke asks, tell him Thomas helped the Duchess escape." The accomplice nodded and left toward the rear stairs. Verena remained alone. Rosamund could have attacked her. The iron candle holder in her hand was heavy enough, but if she revealed herself now, Verena would summon the guards, and Thomas would remain imprisoned. So Rosamund waited. Verena withdrew something from beneath her cloak, Augusta's half-burned letter. She had not destroyed it completely, only the outer portion had caught fire before she smothered the flame. The surviving paper bore several lines of writing and a red wax seal. Verena opened a cupboard, placed the letter inside a wooden box, and locked it. Then she hurried away. Rosamund counted to 20 before pushing against the concealed panel. It opened into an empty coal alcove. Thomas was unconscious but breathing. A bruise darkened his temple. Rosamund knelt beside him. "Thomas, wake up." His eyelids fluttered. "The letter," he whispered. "I saw where she hid it." Using the metal clasp from her sleeve, Rosamund worked the lock on the storage room. It yielded after several attempts. "Can you walk?" Thomas nodded, though he swayed when she helped him stand. Go through the passage and wait inside the tower chamber. If anyone enters, pretend you are still unconscious. What will you do? Find Edmund and recover Augusta's letter. Rosamund opened the wooden box. It was empty. Her pulse stumbled. She had watched Verena place the letter inside only minutes earlier. Then Rosamund noticed a fresh trail of soot across the shelf. The box had a false bottom. She pressed its corners until the inner panel lifted. Beneath it lay the scorched letter and 3 account receipts bearing the same crescent seal. Rosamund unfolded the first receipt. Payment had been made to Silas Mercer for medical preparations. The second authorized him to purchase foxglove, belladonna, and arsenic under the name of Ravenscroft's infirmary. The third was dated 2 weeks earlier. It contained payment for the transportation of 1 minor male to a private institution in France. Edmund. Rosamund tucked the documents inside her bodice. She had enough to prove someone was purchasing poison, but not enough to connect the order directly to Verena. A door opened at the far end of the cellar. Gideon entered carrying a lantern. Rosamund stepped from the storage room, and his expression shifted from surprise to fury. You escaped. Thomas was abducted on Verena's orders. She intends to remove Edmund from England. Do you expect me to believe another accusation? She held out one of the receipts. Read it. Gideon took the paper. His gaze paused on Mercer's name and the list of poisons. For a moment, Rosamund saw uncertainty return. Then Verena appeared behind him. She stole those from my room, she said. I found them among Augusta's papers and intended to give them to you. Rosamund must have discovered the passage and taken them. Rosamund looked directly at her husband. Ask Verena to show you her personal seal. Verena went still. Gideon turned toward her. Before he could speak, a bell began ringing violently from the chapel. A child screamed. Rosamund? It was Edmund. Then came the crack of a gunshot. Rosamund ran before Gideon could stop her. She raced up the cellar stairs and crossed the dark courtyard toward the chapel. Behind her came Gideon's boots and Verena's urgent voice insisting that the Duchess was escaping. The chapel doors stood open. Inside, candles trembled around the altar. Edmund crouched behind the stone baptismal font, clutching his bleeding arm. Near the entrance, Mr. Pritchard held a smoking pistol, while Verena's hired man lay wounded against a pew. Rosamund? Edmund cried. She dropped beside him. The bullet had grazed his upper arm, tearing flesh without entering the bone. You are safe, she told him, pressing her handkerchief firmly against the wound. Keep looking at me. Gideon entered and took in the scene. What happened? Pritchard lowered his weapon. That man was dragging Master Edmund through the priest's passage. I fired when he drew a knife. Verena appeared behind Gideon. He must be working for Rosamund. The wounded man laughed weakly. Rosamund looked at the crescent clasp on his cloak. Then why does he wear your seal? Every face turned toward Verena. That is not mine. Show Gideon your signet. Verena's right hand disappeared into the folds of her gown. Gideon held out his palm. Give it to me. For several seconds, she did not move. Then she removed a gold ring and placed it in his hand. The face displayed a crescent moon. Gideon compared it with the impression on the poison receipt. The shapes matched. His jaw tightened. Explain this. My seal was stolen. By whom? Rosamund asked. The Parrot, Thomas, or the dead woman you can no longer contradict? Verena's composure fractured. She pointed at Rosamund. She has manipulated all of you. Augusta despised her, and now Rosamund wants control of Edmund's trust. I already possessed legal guardianship. Augusta's death weakened my position. It did not strengthen it. Gideon looked toward the hired man. Who paid you? The man's eyes shifted to Verena. Before he could answer, his body convulsed. Rosamund lunged forward and caught his head before it struck the floor. White foam gathered at his lips, and a bitter almond odor rose from his breath. Poison, she said. He swallowed something. Verena took a step backward. Rosamund searched the man's mouth and found fragments of a wax capsule between his teeth. Within moments, he stopped breathing. A prepared suicide dose. Someone had expected him to be captured. Convenient, Verena said quickly. Your only witness is dead. No, Rosamund replied. Edmund saw him. The boy tightened his grip on her sleeve. He said Lady Verena sent him. Verena's expression sharpened. The child is frightened. He will repeat anything Rosamund tells him. I never spoke to him before entering this chapel. Gideon's gaze moved between them. Rosamund waited for him to order Verena's arrest. Instead, he said, No one leaves Ravenscroft until the magistrate arrives. The compromise cut deeper than an accusation. Even now, with Verena's seal on the poison and Edmund's testimony before him, Gideon would not choose the truth plainly. Then release me, Rosamund said. You escaped lawful confinement. To save a child your cousin intended to abduct. The circumstances have changed, but my mother remains dead. Rosamund rose, keeping Edmund behind her. You are not uncertain, Gideon. You are afraid that admitting Verena may be guilty means admitting what you did to me was unforgivable. His face hardened. Verena seized the opening. She should not be permitted to poison your judgment as she poisoned Augusta. Gideon turned to the steward. Place Lady Verena in her rooms under guard. Rosamund will remain in the East Tower. Edmund stepped in front of Rosamund. No. His small voice echoed through the chapel. I will not stay with anyone else. Gideon's expression softened. Edmund, you took her ring. You let them hurt her. Grandmother said Rosamund was the only person I should trust if something happened. The boy's words left Gideon visibly shaken, but he still did not reverse his order. Rosamund knelt and wrapped fresh linen around Edmund's arm. Go with Mr. Pritchard, she said quietly. Stay in the stable master's cottage until the magistrate comes. Edmund looked terrified. What if Verena finds me? She will have to pass me first. Pritchard placed a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. Before they left, Edmund leaned close to Rosamund's ear. Grandmother gave me something yesterday. He slipped a tiny brass key into her palm. She said it opened the drawer beneath Hector's cage. Rosamund closed her fingers around it before Gideon noticed. The constables escorted her back toward the tower. As they crossed the great hall, she looked up at Hector's cage. The parrot was gone. Its brass door hung open. A trail of green feathers led across the carpet toward Gideon's study. Rosamund followed it with her eyes and saw Verena's maid disappearing through the study door, carrying a covered basket. From inside it came Hector's muffled cry, "Mercer knows, Mercer knows." Then the maid locked the study and hurried toward the servants' exit. Rosamund stopped beneath the archway. The constable beside her tightened his grip. "Keep moving, Your Grace. That maid is stealing evidence." He glanced toward the servants' exit, but Verena's maid had already disappeared. Rosamund raised her voice. "Mr. Ward, lock the outer gates." The steward looked up from the far end of the hall. Before he could act, Gideon entered behind them. "What is it now?" "Verena's maid took Hector through your study. She is carrying him in a basket." Gideon frowned. "Why would she do that?" "Because the bird heard Augusta name her killer." Verena appeared at the top of the staircase, still supposedly under guard. Must every servant be accused simply because Rosamund requires another villain? Rosamund looked at the guard behind her. Who permitted Lady Verena to leave her room? The man lowered his eyes. His Grace did. Gideon did not deny it. Rosamund felt something inside her settle into cold certainty. He had not merely failed to trust her, he was actively granting Verena chances to destroy evidence. You released her. I allowed her to change before the magistrate arrived, and allowed her maid to carry away the only witness who heard your mother's final words. Hector is an animal. He is also the reason you finally examined the vial. Gideon's expression hardened. Return Rosamund to the tower. The constable pulled her forward. Rosamund deliberately stumbled against a side table. A porcelain vase crashed to the floor. As servants rushed toward the noise, she slipped Augusta's brass key into the hand of Sarah Wilkes, an elderly maid who had served the dowager for 30 years. Drawer beneath the cage, Rosamund whispered. Find what she left. Sarah closed her fingers around the key without changing expression. Then the front doors opened. Magistrate Lionel Harcourt entered with 2 officers from the county. He was a narrow-faced man, known for valuing noble influence more than inconvenient truth. Behind him stood Silas Mercer. Rosamund recognized the crescent clasp on his coat. Mercer was older than she expected, with silver hair and the smooth hands of a man who paid others to perform violent work. He bowed to Gideon, then looked directly at Rosamund. "Your Grace," he said, "I regret that we meet under such tragic circumstances. You purchased poison in the name of my infirmary." Mercer displayed no surprise. At your written instruction, he opened a leather case and produced several documents. Harcourt examined them. These orders bear the Duchess's signature. Rosamund stepped closer, despite the constable's hold. The handwriting resembled hers, but the phrasing did not. Each order used the words medical provisions. Rosamund always wrote dispensary supplies in estate records. They are forged. Mercer removed a second bundle. These are letters from the Duchess requesting that I arrange the removal of Master Edmund to France after the Dowager's death. That is a lie. The correspondence includes details known only to a guardian. Verena descended the staircase slowly. Perhaps Rosamund intended to control the trust without the inconvenience of caring for the child. Harcourt turned to Gideon. Who else possessed access to the trust accounts? Gideon hesitated. Rosamund knew the answer. 2 months earlier, while she treated fever in the northern villages, Gideon had allowed Verena to assist his secretary. Rosamund had warned him against granting her access to private records. He had dismissed the concern as jealousy. "My cousin had temporary access," he admitted. Verena pressed a hand to her heart. "Because you asked me to help, while Rosamund neglected her duties." "I was treating your tenants," Rosamund said. Gideon did not look at her. Harcourt gathered the documents. "The accusations against Duchess Rosamund are substantial. Until a formal hearing, she will remain confined." "And Lady Verena?" Rosamund demanded. "There is no direct evidence connecting her to the death. The vial carries her seal, a seal she reports stolen. Edmund identified her servant. The servant is dead. Hector heard Augusta accuse her." Harcourt's mouth tightened with impatience. "We will not base a murder inquiry upon the speech of a bird." A flutter of movement sounded above them. Hector flew from the upper gallery and landed on the chandelier. Sarah appeared near Augusta's chamber, breathing hard. She met Rosamund's eyes and gave the smallest nod. She had opened the drawer. Mercer's calm expression vanished when he saw the parrot. "Hector!" he shouted involuntarily. The bird tilted its head. Then, in Augusta's voice, it repeated a sentence no one had heard before. "Mercer, the second ledger is beneath the saint. Silas Mercer reached inside his coat. Rosamund saw the pistol first. "Get down." The shot shattered the chandelier chain. Glass and burning candles rained into the hall as Hector flew toward the chapel, and Mercer ran after him. Rosamund tore free of the constable and ran through the falling glass. A candle struck her shoulder, scorching her sleeve, but she did not stop. Mercer was already crossing the courtyard toward the chapel, pistol in hand. Hector circled above him, crying the same words. Beneath the saint, Gideon and the county officers followed. Magistrate Harcourt remained behind with Verena. Inside the chapel, Mercer went directly to the statue of St. Luke beside the altar. He knew where to look. Rosamund entered through the side aisle as he pulled the statue away from the wall. Behind its pedestal lay a shallow recess containing a black leather ledger. Mercer seized it. "Put it down," Rosamund said. He turned the pistol toward her. "You should have accepted the blame, Your Grace. Your husband had already condemned you. You forged my orders. Your husband made that easy. He gave Lady Verena access to every account, every seal, and every sample of your handwriting." The chapel door opened behind Rosamund. Gideon had heard him. Mercer's eyes shifted toward the Duke, and Rosamund moved. She struck his wrist with a brass candlestick. The pistol discharged into the stone floor. Gideon tackled him before he could recover. The ledger slid across the aisle. Rosamund reached it first. Its pages recorded years of withdrawals from Edmund's trust. Each payment carried Verena's crescent seal, but several authorizations also bore Gideon's genuine signature. He had approved them without reading the attached accounts. One entry was more recent: payment to S. Mercer upon the death of Augusta Vale, remaining balance upon conviction of Duchess Rosamund. The chapel suddenly filled with smoke. Flames crawled beneath the doors. Mercer smiled through the blood on his mouth. "You have been delayed too long." From outside came the thunder of carriage wheels. "Verena," Rosamund said. She had started the fire to trap them while she escaped. Gideon dragged Mercer toward the side passage. "Bring the ledger." A burning beam fell between Rosamund and the exit. Sparks caught in the altar cloth, and fire climbed toward Hector, who had landed on a wooden rail. Rosamund wrapped the ledger inside her scorched overskirt and crossed through the smoke. She seized Hector's cage from behind the altar, opened its door, and held out her arm. "Come to me." The terrified bird flew onto her shoulder. Gideon shouted her name from the passage, but the roof groaned above them. Rosamund could no longer see the opening. Then Thomas appeared through the smoke. This way. He had returned through the old priest's tunnel. Rosamund followed him into the narrow passage moments before part of the chapel ceiling collapsed. They emerged beside the cemetery wall, coughing and blackened with soot. Gideon stood nearby with Mercer under guard. His eyes moved over Rosamund as if confirming she was alive, but she passed him without speaking. Pritchard rode into the churchyard. "Master Edmund is gone." Rosamund stopped. Lady Verena came to the cottage with a written order bearing the Duke's seal. He continued. "The officers said His Grace had transferred the boy into her custody." Gideon reached beneath his coat. His signet ring was missing. Verena had taken it while standing beside him in the great hall. Rosamund opened the ledger to the final page. Tucked inside was a shipping schedule for a vessel departing Dover at sunrise. Beside Edmund's name appeared another instruction. "If the Duchess follows, deliver both to Mercer's warehouse." Mercer began laughing. Gideon seized his collar. "Where is the warehouse?" "You signed away the child's protection months ago," Mercer replied. "Why should I repair your mistake now?" A county officer searched him and found a railway ticket in his pocket. Dover. Rosamund looked toward the eastern horizon. The first gray light of morning had begun to appear. They had less than 4 hours before the ship sailed with Edmund aboard. Rosamund refused the carriage Gideon ordered. "The road will take too long. We use Mercer's railway ticket." Gideon left Mercer in county custody and accompanied her to the station with Pritchard and 2 officers. Neither spoke during the journey south. The black ledger remained beneath Rosamund's arm, wrapped in cloth. At last, Gideon said, "I should have listened." Rosamund kept her eyes on the passing fields. "You should have investigated before taking my ring. I was grieving. You used grief as permission to humiliate me." He lowered his gaze. "Verena told me you wanted control of Edmund's trust. And you believed her, because part of you never stopped seeing me as the physician's daughter who married above her station." Gideon had no answer. They reached Dover shortly before sunrise. Mercer's ticket bore the address of a warehouse near the eastern docks. A clerk there denied knowing Verena until Rosamund noticed a sweet, medicinal odor drifting from the rear room, chloroform. She pushed past him. Edmund lay unconscious inside a shipping crate lined with blankets. His breathing was shallow, but his pulse remained steady. Rosamund lifted him out. "Bring fresh air." "Now." As Pritchard carried the boy outside, Gideon seized the clerk. "Where is Lady Verena?" The man pointed toward the harbor. "She boarded the Caledonia. She said the Duchess would follow." The ship's whistle sounded. Rosamund opened the black ledger and found a folded note between its final pages. The handwriting belonged to Augusta. "If Rosamund reads this, I am dead. Verena is not stealing Edmund's fortune for herself. She is paying someone within the county court. Trust neither Mercer nor the magistrate." Rosamund looked toward the officers who had traveled with them. One had disappeared. The remaining officer suddenly drew his pistol. Gideon stepped between him and Rosamund as the shot fired. The bullet struck the ledger, tearing through its cover and knocking it from her hands. Pritchard tackled the officer. Rosamund recovered the book. Most pages remained intact, but the bullet had exposed a narrow compartment hidden inside its spine. Within it lay a list of payments signed by Magistrate Harcourt. He had helped Verena forge the trust orders, suppress Augusta's letters, and arrange Rosamund's conviction. In return, he would receive half of Edmund's inheritance once the child vanished abroad. A second ship whistle echoed across the harbor. The Caledonia had begun leaving the dock. Gideon looked at the ledger. "We have enough to clear your name. Not if Verena reaches France and claims the documents are forged." Rosamund handed the book to Pritchard. "Take Edmund and this ledger to the county assizes. Give it directly to the senior judge, not Harcourt." Then she turned toward the departing vessel. Gideon caught her arm. "You cannot board it now." Rosamund pointed to a pilot boat tied beside the pier. "I can reach it before it clears the harbor. I am coming with you." "No, your duty is to protect Edmund. My decisions placed both of you in danger. Then begin repairing the damage by obeying me." For the first time, Gideon released control without argument. Rosamund climbed into the pilot boat. A harbor worker took the oars, and they cut across the water toward the Caledonia. A rope ladder hung from its stern. Rosamund caught it and climbed aboard as the cliffs of Dover receded behind them. The deck appeared deserted. Then Verena stepped from behind the mast holding a silver cup. "You always did follow the child," she said. Rosamund smelled the same bitter tonic that had killed Augusta. Verena smiled and poured it into the ship's drinking water barrel. Below deck, dozens of passengers were already filling their cups. "Do not drink the water," Rosamund shouted. Passengers crowded beneath the main deck froze with tin cups halfway to their mouths. A mother slapped a cup from her daughter's hand, while two sailors stared in confusion at the stream pouring from the barrel. Verena seized a belaying pin and struck the wooden spigot. Poisoned water flooded across the deck, mixing with seawater beneath their boots. "She is mad!" Verena cried. "That woman murdered the Dowager Duchess of Ravenscroft. She boarded this vessel to kill me." Rosamund grabbed an empty bucket and kicked it beneath the leaking stream. "Captain, test the water before another person drinks it." The captain pushed through the passengers. "Test it how? Lower a polished silver spoon into the bucket. If the mixture contains the mineral poison I suspect, the surface will darken." A steward produced a spoon from the dining cabin. Within moments of touching the water, its bright surface turned gray-black. Fear swept across the deck. The captain ordered his sailors to seal the barrel and search every other water container aboard. Verena backed toward the stern rail. Rosamund followed slowly. "You used the same mixture in Augusta's tonic. You cannot prove that. Your seal was pressed into the vial. Mercer purchased the ingredients. Hector heard Augusta confront you, and now an entire ship has witnessed you contaminate its water." Verena's expression twisted. "That fortune belonged to my family long before Augusta placed it in the hands of a weak, frightened child. So you stole from Edmund's trust. I took what should have been mine. You took thousands through Mercer, but Augusta discovered the missing payments. That is why she had to die." Verena gave a bitter laugh. "She intended to expose me and leave me penniless." She spoke of duty while protecting Rosamund, the brilliant physician's daughter, who never understood her place. "You forged my signature because my medicines offered you the perfect weapon. I barely had to forge anything," Verena replied. "Gideon gave me your accounts, your letters, and access to your seal. He was so eager to believe your intelligence concealed ambition." Rosamund's jaw tightened. "You persuaded him that I wanted Edmund's inheritance. I told him you considered yourself cleverer than his entire family." Verena smiled cruelly. He already resented knowing it was true. Several passengers exchanged glances. The captain had heard every word. So had the first officer, 4 sailors, and more than a dozen travelers. Verena suddenly realized she had confessed before witnesses. "You manipulated Gideon," Rosamund said, "but he still chose to condemn me without examining the evidence. His guilt does not erase yours, and yours will not erase his." "Do you imagine these people will defend you?" Verena demanded. "Harcourt controls the inquiry. By the time we return, they will be told that you poisoned the barrel yourself. Then they may say what they witnessed under oath." The captain stepped forward. "Lady Verena, you will surrender peacefully." Verena swung the belaying pin at Rosamund. Rosamund ducked. The iron end struck the rail hard enough to splinter it. She caught Verena's wrist, but Verena drove her shoulder forward, crushing Rosamund against the mast. They struggled across the wet deck as passengers scattered. Verena reached inside her sleeve and produced a narrow knife. "You should have died in the East Tower." She thrust the blade. Rosamund twisted aside. The knife sliced through her scorched sleeve, grazing her arm. Before Verena could strike again, Hector swooped down from the rigging and clawed at her face. Verena screamed and dropped the weapon. 2 sailors seized her arms and forced her to her knees. The captain picked up the knife. "Confine her below deck, place a guard outside the door, and turn this vessel back to Dover." As Verena was dragged away, she twisted toward Rosamund. "Gideon will protect me. He always chooses his blood over you." Rosamund watched the sailors lock her inside a cabin. Perhaps Verena still believed it. Rosamund no longer cared. Gideon's belief was not her only path to justice. The passengers had seen the poisoned water, the captain had heard Verina's admission, and the darkened silver spoon remained sealed inside an evidence box. When the Caledonia returned to Dover, county officers waited along the pier. Gideon stood among them with Edmund wrapped in a wool blanket. The child's face remained pale from the chloroform, but the moment Rosamund stepped ashore, he ran toward her. She dropped to her knees and held him against her. "I knew you would come back," he whispered. "I will always come when you call." Over Edmund's shoulder, she saw Gideon watching them. His face carried exhaustion, shame, and something that might once have moved her. Now it merely reminded her how much damage his remorse had arrived too late to prevent. He waited until Edmund released her. "Pritchard never reached the county assizes," Gideon said. "Harcourt's men stopped his carriage and took the ledger. Is Pritchard alive?" "Injured, but alive. Harcourt now claims the ledger was created after my mother's death." The captain heard Verina confess. So did the passengers. "They have been summoned to testify." Before Rosamund could answer, Magistrate Harcourt emerged from a black carriage. "Duchess Rosamund," he announced, "you are under arrest for the murder of Augusta Vale, the abduction of her grandson, and the attempted poisoning of the passengers aboard the Caledonia." A stunned murmur spread through the crowd. The captain stepped forward. "That accusation is false." Harcourt ignored him. Rosamund looked toward Verina, expecting panic. Instead, Verina smiled from between her guards. Harcourt raised the scorched black ledger for everyone to see. Every page bearing his name had been torn out. The hearing was moved to Ravenscroft's Great Hall 3 days later. Magistrate Harcourt claimed the estate offered greater security than the county courthouse. Rosamund understood the true reason. Inside Gideon's house, Harcourt expected servants to fear their employer, tenants to fear losing their homes, and the Duke to protect his family's name. The hall where Gideon had taken Rosamund's wedding ring was transformed into a temporary court. Harcourt sat beneath the Ravenscroft crest. Verina occupied a chair near him, dressed in mourning black, while Mercer stood under guard beside the fireplace. Rosamund entered without jewels or title insignia. Edmund walked beside her, holding her hand. Every servant who had witnessed her humiliation was present. Harcourt began before the senior county judge could arrive. The evidence establishes that Duchess Rosamund prepared the fatal tonic, purchased the poison through Mr. Mercer, abducted Master Edmund, and later contaminated the water aboard the Caledonia to eliminate witnesses. The captain rose angrily. "I watched Lady Verina pour poison into that barrel." Harcourt struck his gavel. "You witnessed a woman empty a cup. You cannot establish what it contained." The silver spoon blackened. "Silver reacts with many harmless substances." Rosamund stood. "Not in the manner observed. Dr. Halbrook can confirm that the residue contained arsenic." The physician stepped forward, but Harcourt dismissed him with a glance. "Dr. Halbrook served the Ravenscroft household under your authority. His independence is questionable. Then permit a London chemist to examine it." The barrel was emptied at sea. "No reliable sample remains." The captain produced a sealed glass bottle. "I preserved one." For the first time, Harcourt faltered. Rosamund saw Verina lean toward him and whisper. A moment later, he recovered his composure. "Even if the water was poisoned, it does not prove who poisoned it." More than 20 passengers heard Verina confess to stealing Edmund's inheritance and arranging Augusta's death, Rosamund said. "Passengers frightened by disorder may misunderstand heated words." Rosamund looked across the packed hall. Harcourt did not intend to weigh the evidence. He intended to bury it beneath doubt until only his authority remained. He lifted the black ledger. This document allegedly recorded payments to Lady Verena and myself, yet no such entries now exist, because your officers removed them. An accusation without proof. It was Augusta's ledger, also without proof. Verena stood with carefully measured grief. My aunt had grown confused during her final months. Rosamund exploited that weakness, just as she trained the Parrot to repeat accusations. From the rear of the hall, Hector screamed inside his restored cage. Verena changed the bottle. Nervous laughter passed through the crowd. Harcourt struck the gavel again. "Remove the animal." "No," Rosamund said. Two officers moved toward the cage, but she stepped between them. "Hector cannot establish guilt by himself, but he can establish where Augusta spent her final hours and which words she heard. That is speculation. Then let us rely on objects rather than words." Sarah Wilkes approached carrying a small cedar box. She had retrieved it from the hidden drawer beneath Hector's cage, using the key Edmund had given Rosamund. Inside were Augusta's personal seal, a packet of bank drafts, and a folded statement signed 2 days before her death. Harcourt's face tightened. Verena moved toward the box, but a county officer blocked her. Rosamund opened Augusta's statement. "My mother was ill," Gideon said quietly. "Will the court accept her signature?" Harcourt seized upon the question. "His Grace raises a serious concern. A dying woman, influenced by her physician, may sign anything placed before her." The remark struck the room like a blow. Rosamund turned toward Gideon. Once again, he had created an opening that Harcourt could use against her. But Gideon stood. "That is not what I meant." Harcourt frowned. "Your Grace, my mother's signature should be compared with earlier documents. I did not mean to suggest Rosamund coerced her. You previously stated that your wife resented the dowager. I was wrong." Verena stared at him. Gideon stepped into the center of the hall, before the servants who had watched him condemn Rosamund. "I gave Lady Verena access to the estate accounts, despite my wife's warning. I signed payment orders without reading them. When my mother died, I accepted forged evidence because it confirmed what pride had already persuaded me to believe." Harcourt interrupted. "This confession of carelessness does not prove murder." "No," Gideon replied, "but it proves Lady Verena possessed the records required to forge Rosamund's handwriting, and that my choices gave her the means." His gaze moved toward his wife. "I removed Rosamund's ring before witnesses. I denied her authority over Edmund, ignored the seal on the vial, and confined her after evidence pointed elsewhere. Lady Verena deceived me, but I chose not to investigate. The disgrace belongs to me." Silence filled the hall. Rosamund did not thank him. A truthful admission was not a gift. It was a debt finally being paid. Harcourt's jaw hardened. "Touching, Your Grace, but irrelevant." He opened Augusta's statement and pretended to examine it. "The Dowager accuses Lady Verena of unauthorized withdrawals. She does not mention poison, murder, or my alleged involvement. This paper proves nothing." "It proves Augusta discovered the theft," Rosamund said. "It provides a possible dispute, not a killing." Mercer laughed softly from beside the fireplace. Harcourt looked toward him. "Do you find something amusing? You promised the Duchess would hang before noon." The words escaped before Mercer realized the hall had gone quiet. Harcourt rose. "Remove him." Mercer's guard seized his arms. Rosamund stepped forward. "Why would Harcourt promise my conviction before hearing the evidence?" Mercer's eyes moved between Harcourt and Verena. Fear gave way to calculation. "If I testify, I want protection. You will receive none from me," Harcourt snapped. "Then I will speak to the senior judge." The senior judge is not coming. Harcourt had revealed too much. Rosamund saw it in the faces around her. You intercepted the summons, she said. Harcourt struck the table. Enough. Duchess Rosamund will be taken into custody pending trial. The officers hesitated. Rosamund picked up the damaged ledger. You removed the pages bearing your name, but you overlooked what my father taught me about medical notebooks. She placed a blank sheet over the page beneath the torn section and rubbed it lightly with charcoal from the fireplace. Indented writing slowly appeared. Each line had been pressed into the sheet below when Augusta wrote on the original page. Names, dates, amounts, and instructions emerged in dark gray. L. Harcourt, payment for dismissal of guardianship petition. L. Harcourt, payment upon conviction of R. Vale. Authority to transfer Edmund Vale abroad following the Duchess's arrest. A gasp moved through the hall. Rosamund continued rubbing until a final line appeared. Verena confirms the tonic will be administered before midnight. Harcourt lunged across the table and snatched the ledger. Before anyone could stop him, he threw it into the fireplace. Flames consumed the exposed page. Verena smiled again, but Thomas Bell stepped from the crowd holding a second sheet of paper. I copied every indentation before the hearing, he said. Behind him, the great doors opened. A royal circuit judge entered with 6 armed officers, and Sarah Wilkes walked at his side. The judge raised a sealed warrant. Lionel Harcourt, you are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, destruction of evidence, and obstruction of a murder investigation. Harcourt reached inside his coat. Rosamund saw the pistol, but he was not aiming at the judge. He pointed it at Edmund. Rosamund moved before Harcourt pulled the trigger. She swept Edmund behind the heavy oak table and threw herself over him. The pistol fired. The ball struck the carved Ravenscroft crest above them, splitting the wooden crown in two. Gideon lunged across the hall and drove Harcourt to the floor. The magistrate fought for the weapon, but the royal officers surrounded him. One pinned his arm, while another removed the pistol. Harcourt was dragged upright, his authority gone as abruptly as Rosamund's had been taken from her 3 nights earlier. The circuit judge ordered every door locked. No one leaves until the evidence is secured and each witness has given a statement. Verena attempted to slip toward the servants' corridor. Thomas pointed at her before she reached it. She is escaping. 2 officers blocked her path. Verena turned toward Gideon. You cannot allow them to treat me like a common criminal. I am your cousin. Gideon stood between her and the door. You relied upon that distinction for too long. Her face twisted. I did what was necessary to preserve this family. You poisoned my mother, stole from a child, and framed my wife because I gave you the opportunity. No, you framed her. The accusation silenced him. Verena stepped closer, though the officers held her arms. I placed the vial. I forged the letters. But you called Rosamund a poisoner before I had to prove anything. You removed her ring, surrendered Edmund to me, and ignored every fact that threatened your pride. Gideon did not deny it. Rosamund rose from behind the table, with Edmund pressed against her side. She is right about one thing, Rosamund said. Verena built the trap, but you closed it. The circuit judge ordered Thomas's copy of the ledger impressions sealed. Augusta's statement, the bank drafts from Hector's drawer, Verena's crescent signet, Mercer's poison orders, the preserved water sample, and the captain's testimony were placed into separate evidence boxes. Then Rosamund explained the entire scheme. Verena had begun stealing from Edmund's trust 2 years earlier, after gambling debts consumed the small fortune left by her late husband. Gideon's decision to grant her access to the estate accounts allowed her to study Rosamund's handwriting, duplicate her labels, and use the Duke's genuine signatures to disguise unauthorized payments. Mercer purchased arsenic, belladonna, and foxglove under the name of Rosamund's Infirmary. Harcourt suppressed Augusta's inquiries and prepared to remove Rosamund as Edmund's guardian. Once Augusta discovered the theft, Verena changed the dowager's sleeping tonic, sealed the false vial with her crescent ring, and planted it where the household would find it. She expected Gideon's resentment toward his wife's intelligence and lower birth to do the rest. The plan had nearly succeeded because Gideon refused to examine the wax, confined Rosamund after the Parrot named Verena, and temporarily surrendered Edmund's protection. His signature authorized the very payments that financed the poisoning, abduction, and false prosecution. Augusta anticipated that the ledger might be destroyed. She therefore hid duplicate bank drafts and her signed statement beneath Hector's cage. The bird's repeated phrases directed Rosamund toward the Red Room, Mercer, and the second ledger. Even when Harcourt tore out the incriminating pages, their impressions remained pressed into the sheets below. Mercer listened until the judge offered leniency in exchange for complete testimony. Then he abandoned Verena and Harcourt. He admitted purchasing the poisons, hiring the man who attempted to abduct Edmund from the chapel, and arranging passage to France. He also identified the apothecary, bank clerks, and corrupt officers who had assisted them. Verena stopped denying Augusta's murder only when Dr. Halbrook produced his examination of the residue from the silver cup. Its composition matched the poison recovered from Mercer's warehouse and the sample taken aboard the Caledonia. By sunset, Rosamund's arrest order was formally withdrawn. The circuit judge restored her position as Edmund's sole guardian and froze the Ravenscroft trust until every stolen pound could be recovered. He ordered a public notice clearing her name to be printed in every county newspaper that had reported Augusta's death. Verena was charged with murder, attempted mass poisoning, abduction, fraud, and conspiracy. Harcourt faced removal from office, imprisonment, and confiscation of the property purchased with stolen trust money. Mercer's cooperation reduced his sentence, but it did not spare him transportation and the permanent loss of his business. The officers and servants who had accepted bribes were dismissed and prosecuted according to their involvement. But Rosamund insisted upon one further statement before the assembled household. She faced Gideon in the same place where he had taken her ring. "What happened here cannot be blamed entirely upon Verena," she said. "You had the power to stop it when I showed you the crescent seal. You chose confinement. You could have protected Edmund when he named his abductor. You chose delay. You could have preserved the evidence when Hector spoke. You released Verena and allowed her to destroy it." Gideon's face was pale, but he did not look away. "You are right. Say what you did, not what she persuaded you to believe." Before his servants, tenants, Edmund, and the judge, Gideon named each wrong. He admitted that he had publicly accused Rosamund without proof, stripped her of dignity before the household, endangered Edmund by removing her guardianship, and placed family pride above truth. He acknowledged that class prejudice made Verena's lies comfortable to accept, and that grief did not excuse cruelty. Then he removed the Ravenscroft signet from his hand. "I will resign as trustee of Edmund's inheritance. Every property purchased through the stolen funds will be transferred back to the trust. Rosamund's infirmary and the adjoining land will be placed in her name alone." Rosamund studied him. "And our marriage?" Gideon's voice lowered. "I will not ask you to remain, because I regret losing you. If you seek a formal separation, I will support it, provide the residence and income guaranteed by your settlement, and make no claim upon your work or guardianship of Edmund. It was the first apology he had offered that did not contain a request for comfort. Rosamund accepted the restitution. She did not offer forgiveness. 3 months later, Verena and Harcourt were convicted. The court restored every recoverable portion of Edmund's inheritance. Augusta's remaining property passed according to her lawful will, leaving Rosamund independent control of the village infirmary. Rosamund moved with Edmund into a house beside it. She expanded the small clinic into a hospital with 12 beds, a dispensary, and 2 rooms where women could study medicine under her supervision. Thomas became her assistant. Sarah managed the household, and Pritchard oversaw the land attached to Edmund's trust. Gideon kept his distance. He published a signed correction in the newspapers, rebuilt the chapel he had failed to protect, and sold one of his estates to repay the trust immediately rather than waiting for the courts to calculate his liability. He visited Edmund only with Rosamund's permission and never again invoked his title to overrule her. On the first morning the new hospital opened, Gideon arrived alone. He carried a small velvet box. Rosamund knew what lay inside before he opened it, her wedding ring. "I took this from you as though your dignity belonged to me," he said. It never did. He placed the box on the table without attempting to touch her. "I do not expect you to wear it again." Rosamund looked at the gold band that had once represented security, then public rejection. She closed the lid and returned the box to him. "Keep it as a reminder of what certainty costs when it is chosen before truth." Gideon accepted the box. "Is there any future in which you might allow me to earn your trust?" "There may be a future in which I no longer hate what you did," she replied. "That is not the same as returning to you." Pain crossed his face, but he bowed. "I understand." This time he truly seemed to. Rosamund opened the hospital doors. Villagers waited outside beneath the morning sun, mothers carrying infants, laborers with bandaged hands, and young women arriving for their first lesson. Edmund stood beside Hector's cage near the entrance. The parrot tilted its head toward Gideon. Everyone waited for it to repeat the old accusation. Instead, Hector looked at Rosamund and called, "Dr. Vale, open the door." Rosamund smiled. She stepped across the threshold, leaving the wedding ring behind and carrying the hospital keys in her own hand.